I am sitting in a darkened room, watching the ghost white glow of my phone screen as it illuminates the dust motes in the air. It hasn't stopped vibrating for 3 straight hours. It hums against a mahogany desk like a trapped insect, desperate and frantic. 163 unread messages. I haven't opened a single one. I don't need to see the words to know the tone. These aren't messages of love or concern. They are the panic cries of people who suddenly realize the ground beneath their feet wasn't made of rock, but my silent sacrifices. They are the sound of a house of cards finally catching the wind. It all began on a biting Thursday in November, my 33rd birthday. I didn't want a gala. I didn't want a surprise party with cheap streamers and 4 smiles. I just wanted a single hour of peace and a decent meal. I made a reservation at a place called the Gilded Oak, a sophisticated, dimly lit bistro downtown known for its heavy velvet curtains and expensive wine list. It wasn't the kind of place that would break a wealthy man, but when you are paying for 7 people on a budget that has been bled dry for years, it hits differently. The bill came to $486. At that moment, that was nearly every cent I had to my name. My family told me they wanted to celebrate. That's what the group chat said. At least, looking back, I realized they weren't there to celebrate my life. They were there to perform an autopsy on it, dissecting my choices with precision of surgeons who have forgotten their bedside manner. My father, Alaric, arrived 25 minutes late. He walked in trailing the scent of expensive bourbon and tobacco, looking annoyed that he'd had to park his own car. My mother, Estelle, was already seated, but she didn't offer a greeting. She spent the first 20 minutes of my birthday dinner lecturing the young hostess about the unacceptable temperature of the room. Then there was Caspian, my older brother. He entered with a wireless headset practically glued to his ear, loudly narrating a corporate merger he was supposedly architecting for a firm in the city. My sister, Serafina, arrived with our Aunt Morgana. Morgana is the kind of person who treats a dinner menu like a personal grievance, sighing at the lack of organic options. The last to join us was my cousin, Sebastian, the family's golden child, who had just returned from a 6-month sabbatical in the Mediterranean. We ordered appetizers. I sat at the head of the table, feeling the cold weight of the credit card in my pocket. For a few minutes, the conversation was tolerable. Then, Alaric leaned back, swirled his amber drink, and cast a familiar, heavy gaze toward me. "So, Julian," he began, his voice carrying a practiced edge of disappointment. "How is that logistics job?" Still answering the phones for the truckers. I told him it was fine. I'm a senior technical analyst for a global shipping conglomerate. It's a demanding role. It's stable. It has a pension plan. But Alaric did that thing he always does. He looked at Estelle and tightened his jaw, a silent, shared signal that they had spent the morning discussing how I was the only child who hadn't made it. He didn't stop there. He launched into a monologue about Sebastian's latest triumph. Apparently, Sebastian had just closed on his 5th investment property, a luxury loft he'd renovated with nothing but grit and vision, though we all knew he'd never held a hammer in his life. Alaric looked at me, his eyes scanning my modest suit. "You're still in that studio apartment, aren't you? The one near the rail yards?" I don't understand how a man of 33 can be content living like a college student. He said it like I was living in a cardboard box under a bridge. Estelle leaned in before I could even take a sip of my wine. She told the table that when her social circle asks what I do, she tells them I'm a global infrastructure consultant, because saying technical support made her feel like a failure as a mother. She had been lying to her garden club for 4 years about my career, because the truth wasn't prestigious enough to keep her status intact. Caspian finally disconnected his call. He didn't offer a birthday wish. He just asked if I planned on fixing computers until I retired or if I had any actual drive left in my soul. He laughed, a sharp, rattling sound, and said that online certifications were just participation trophies for people who couldn't handle real competition. Then came the moment that shattered the world I had tried so hard to build for them. Caspian reached across the table and snatched my phone. It was sitting right next to my glass. I don't know how he knew my passcode. Maybe he'd watched me over my shoulder during a previous family gathering, but he bypassed the security with a smirk. He opened my banking app. He held the screen up, rotating it slowly so everyone at the table could see the truth. $12, Caspian announced, his voice booming over the ambient music of the restaurant. Our global consultant has exactly $12.60 in his checking account on his own birthday. Serafina actually pulled out her own phone and took a photograph of my screen. She said she wanted to keep it as a motivation piece, a reminder of what happens when you settle for a life of mediocrity. I didn't yell. I didn't reach for the phone. I didn't even flinch. I just sat there, frozen in the amber light of the bistro, while my siblings and my parents laughed at my poverty. The waiter arrived with a check. The table went quiet for a heartbeat. Then Alaric raised his glass in a mock gesture of respect. "To Julian," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "May he eventually find a benefactor with a soft heart, because it's clear he'll never build a legacy on his own." They all clinked their glasses over my head. I took the bill. I paid the $486 on a credit card that I knew was nearing its limit. We walked out to the parking lot, and they all hugged me, telling me they'd see me at the winter holidays, acting as if they hadn't just spent 3 hours stripping me of my dignity. I drove back to my small, quiet apartment. I sat in the darkness for a very long time. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first call was to the trust management firm that handles the mortgage for my parents' ancestral estate. The second was the financing agency for the German sports car Caspian drove to the restaurant. The third was to my landlord, informing him that I would be vacating my lease within the month. You see, there was a secret my family neglected to mention at dinner. They didn't mention it because they had spent nearly a decade pretending it wasn't the reality of their existence. For the last 6 years, I haven't just been fixing computers. I have been the silent architect of their survival. Alaric's firm didn't just slow down in 2018. It collapsed. He never told Caspian or Serafina. He came to me, humbled and weeping, begging for a way to keep up appearances so he wouldn't have to admit to his successful children that he had lost everything. Every single month, I sent them $2,000. That is why my bank account was empty. That is why I lived in a studio apartment. I was paying the mortgage on a house I wasn't allowed to inherit. And Caspian? His big commissions were a fabrication. 3 years ago, he was about to be evicted and lose his vehicle. I co-signed for him because he was blood. When he couldn't meet the payments, I covered them. I have paid over $18,000 toward a car he uses to look important while he mocks my bus pass. That night, after the birthday dinner, the charity died. I instructed the management firm to cease the automated transfers from my account. I told the car financing office that I was withdrawing my financial backing and requested a formal review of the primary borrower's chronic delinquency. Then I packed my life into a few sturdy boxes. I didn't answer their calls throughout November. I worked through the holidays, taking every high-stakes shift available. I spent those weeks listening to strangers complain about software while I meticulously documented every cent I had funneled into my family's delusions over the last half-decade. The total was nearly $94,000. By the first week of December, the reality of their situation began to settle like ash. The mortgage payment bounced. Alaric and Estelle received a formal notice from the bank. Caspian's car was flagged for immediate repossession. That's when the messages started. At first, they were merely confused. "Julian, there's an error with the banking portal. Can you resolve it?" Then they became demanding. "Julian, pick up the phone immediately. We have obligations to meet. This is irresponsible of you." By the middle of the month, they were hysterical. Estelle sent a frantic email claiming I was destabilizing my father's health. Caspian sent a string of texts calling me a traitor for sabotaging his reputation. Serafina called me, sobbing, saying the family was in a state of emergency and it was all my fault because I was being hypersensitive about a few jokes at a dinner. I didn't respond. I moved 60 miles away to a different city. I accepted a position with a rival firm that offered me a significant salary increase and a relocation bonus. I opened a savings account that belonged to me and only me. On December 20th, I finally answered a single call. It was Caspian. He was at a vehicle impound lot. They had taken his car from the parking lot of a high-end club in front of his associates. "How could you do this?" he screamed, his voice cracking. "You're my brother. You destroyed my life over a few laughs at a steakhouse." I asked him one question. "Do you still have that photo Serafina took? The one of my $12 balance?" He was silent for a moment. "What does that matter now?" "Look at that number, Caspian," I said, my voice calm, "and then ask yourself why it was that low for 6 years. I spent my youth making sure you didn't look like a failure. On my birthday, you decided to make sure the whole world thought I was one. You wanted me to have ambition? Well, I found it. My ambition is to never have to hear your voice again." I disconnected the call. I heard through the grapevine, mostly from Sebastian, who has suddenly decided he needs a mentor, that Alaric and Estelle are 60 days away from a foreclosure sale. They try to ask Caspian for help, only to discover his bank accounts are as empty as his promises. They try to ask Serafina, but she is too preoccupied with maintaining her social standing apart with a single dollar. They finally realize that the disappointment at the head of the table was the only pillar holding up their world. It is now January. I am sitting in my new home. It is on the top floor of a quiet building. It has a view of the skyline and a kitchen that has never known the stress of a bounced check. My phone is still humming on the desk, but I have a technician coming to change the number this afternoon. They wanted me to grow up. They wanted me to move on. They wanted me to be successful. I finally followed their advice. I just didn't bring them with me. The 164th message just arrived. It's from Estelle. It says, "We are devastated. We truly didn't know the extent of things. Please come home." I believe the devastated part. People are always devastated when the source of their unearned luxury disappears. But the "we didn't know" part? That is the greatest fiction they ever authored. They knew I was a good son. They just never imagined that a good son could finally decide to be a free man. I'm deleting the thread. I'm powering down the device. And for the first time in my adult life, I'm going to go out and celebrate my birthday properly. 2 months late, and worth every single second of the wait.